Hello everyone, welcome to Talk to OBN. Today we have a guest. Our today's guest is a renowned author and a senior economic analyst, Dr. Constatinos Behretesfa, and we're going to discuss on the homegrown economic reform agenda being undertaken by the government in the country and the recent IMF reports about Ethiopia's economic growth. And this is your OBN. Stay tuned. Excellency, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Just to begin with, and what is your take on the economic reform taking place in the country, especially the homegrown economic policy being undertaken by the government?
The homegrown economic program is trying to fine-tune and put the development stage in a new pedestal. And it has included several items beyond infrastructure development and the usual human development services, where, for example, like services like tourism, like the logistics development in the country, liberalization of the economy, so that we can have a strong private sector to participate in the economy. And also, the country has been borrowing a lot of money to be able to pay for the infrastructure debt that was paid for during the development phase in terms of dams, transmission lines, roads, railways, industrial parks. Some of them have succeeded, some of them, like the sugar factories, have not succeeded. The fertilizer factories have not succeeded. So in a way, the Home Economic Growth Program was trying to refine the agenda so that it could project Ethiopia into in the 21st century. And therefore, it is multifaceted. It has a very ambitious goal in terms of transforming Ethiopia. So on a general note, what I would say is Ethiopia has several challenges in the economic sector. One, of course, is the COVID-19, which literally shut down the supply chain globally. The second one is the kind of lack of law and order in the country, where we have conflicts in different parts of the country. The government is trying to resolve this through various mechanisms, including the Pretoria Agreement with the northern fighters. And that is a serious challenge for the Home Economic Growth Program. The second, of course, is the challenge we have is external in terms of the debt the country has. It has to pay a lot of money to our debtors. Negotiations are taking place within the framework of the G20, the SSI, and the Paris Club, China. Definitely, so far, the kind of GDP growth we see in Ethiopia is still above average, and of course, better than most of the countries in the world. Recently, I saw the Ministry of Planning saying that the growth would be reaching 7.9%. This is phenomenal. And of course, the 7% has been, 7% has been talked about by the World Bank and IMF, and many pundits talk about it. And the point is, having this kind of growth during this stressful period means that the Home Economic Growth Program is really proceeding in its own path.
I see, great. How do you see the recent GDP reports by IMF about Ethiopia's economic growth?
Well, the IMF report is very positive. Of course, we have several issues with the IMF in terms of the loans that Ethiopia has requested, the $3.5 billion. And the IMF demands conditionalities, of course, in terms of the exchange rate, in terms of the prudency in government expenditure, and in terms of better economic governance. So I'm sure these discussions would result in something like an agreement between the IMF and the Ethiopian government. But definitely the IMF is very positive in terms of Ethiopia's growth and development. They have concerns. The concerns they have put in their Article 4 consultation are like, one, the conflicts that are going in the country that have to be resolved as soon as possible. through dialogue. Of course, the government has set up a dialogue commission. They have concerns in terms of the macroeconomic governance in the country, and therefore these are simple things that can be fixed, and I'm sure the Ethiopian government is working on these conditionalities to be able to receive $3.5 billion. But more than that, maybe we'll come later on into this, but definitely the economic restructuring that's taking place in Ethiopia right now, as I see it, one is, for example, the foundation of the capital markets, which are going to be an important catalyst for our economic development. Number two is the invitation foreign capital coming into the country through the private sector. So far, we've been depending on loans and grants from major donors and international business, but definitely bringing in capital through the private sector here will not only assist the economy, it would transform it. It would revolutionize the economy in a major way. And the second thing is the fear that Ethiopian indigenous banks will be dented because of this is unfounded. In fact, they will be the biggest beneficiaries when foreign banks come into the country. But there is a kind of miasma of thinking where Ethiopian banks are not ready to compete with them. Of course, they don't have to compete with them. What we've seen, for example, when China opened up its markets for foreign banks, when the UAE opened up its markets for the foreign banks, they had ways and means of protecting the indigenous banks. It's only a year ago that China allowed its local banks to compete with the international banks. And therefore, I think capital is the key factor in our development. We have built the infrastructure, we've built industrial parks, we've built our cities. We have a very young generation that's coming out of 50 universities, educational and vocational institutions. So we're ready to take off in our development now in this country. The only thing remaining is capital. And frankly, the fact that the government has now tried to open the financial sector to international trading, and the fact that even export, import, and trade business are open now for foreigners is a major step in achieving the goal of our national development.
Mm-hmm. According to the IMF report, Ethiopia's economy is registering, significant growth beside, internal and external challenges. And can we say this is the results of the homegrown economic policy that the government is undertaking?
Well, the homegrown economic policy focus on the development of the country. And of course, it couldn't have foreseen the kind of challenge we have today, for example, COVID. It couldn't have foreseen the conflicts. So definitely any planning is not something that's cast in stone or in gold. Planning has to be dynamic. It has to change depending on circumstance, depending on the environment within which that planning is being transformed into development. And therefore, there is a need to review our targets, there is a need to review our priorities, there is a need to review depending on the availability of capital, depending on the availability of information on the productivity of the different sectors in the country. If you take tourism, for example, it has been emasculated for different reasons. Of course, our tourism income is still at a good point since after the COVID-19, our hotels are functional, conference and business are coming back. But definitely, the traditional historic route for our tourism now is completely off the table. So these are things that we need to do in planning. It's a dynamic instrument within which we have to look into a kind of SWOT analysis, strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats from time to time, so that the planning could guide the country properly. It's not something like a yearly budget that is, even budgets are reprogrammed in many cases. And planning must really look into the current challenge and see how that plan could be implemented. We cannot simply say 10 years is a framework. today, it's a fast-changing world. We had the war in Ukraine, which had completely dismantled the world economy, literally, it's in terms of supply chain, COVID, and now we have the Middle East crisis. With the Middle East crisis, the Red Sea has become a contested arena where the Houthi rebels in Yemen are now hitting at Western carriers. And therefore, what is the impact of this? For example, Djibouti has been impacted very, very seriously since many ships are not calling on the Djibouti port. So these are things that affect our planning too. International exchange rates, the prominence of the dollar, and the idea that the BRICS countries are trying to transform the international exchange of finance through their own currencies. So all this have an impact on our planning, and therefore we need to be very vigilant in terms of looking at what are the things we need to change immediately, what are the trajectories we have to look into, what are the new priorities that are emerging out of this in terms of opportunities or threats. So definitely I haven't done an assessment of the homegrown economic reform. I have neither seen any assessment of the homegrown economic reform. The documents are very difficult to find, and therefore, but definitely I'm 100% sure that with the GDP growth of this amount.
Under this homegrown economic reform, the government is expanding and establishing new special economic zones. And how do you see that as a senior economic analyst?
Special economic zones have become a catalyst for development. We can see China. Within 3 decades, China has achieved what the West has achieved in three centuries. So special economic zones are economic zones that have, well, the name special denotes it, that have special kind of bureaucracy, that have special kind of policy reflection, and of course that have special interests within the government and the private sector that are going to work within these areas. When we talk about special economic zones, we're talking about areas where, for example, importers can import stuff into the special economic zone, process it and export it again. This process will not involve any kind of customs modalities, which means it will reduce the amount of time the investors are spending on their production. The second thing is the government will focus on it, so much so that the administration of the special economic zones will be handled by professionals who understand what's really going on in terms of handling investors, in terms of attracting foreign direct investment, in terms of even getting Ethiopian investors, domestic investors into special economic zones. The third area is we're exporting most of our products raw, like coffee, for example. Of course, we have started now with some kind of processed coffee where we have some kind of value added to it. But the bulk of our exports are simply probably in 30 or 50 kg bags. This economic processing zones will change that because, number one, the size of the bags will be reduced. The branding of the coffee will be seen very clearly, not just some kind of a sack, where I see sometimes is handwritten on it, what kind of coffee you have in there. But, people, organizations like Starbucks, even when I was in New York with the United Nations, I go to Starbucks, I see Irga FA coffee, well branded, put in a nice way, Harar coffee, Sidamo coffee. This is what our special economic zones should be doing. Especially now, since we have China, which is a new destination for coffee consumption, it's very important to have high quality packaging, high quality standards, and of course, we should have also the ISO numbers clearly stated so that people on the other end know exactly what kind of product they are buying. So our special economic zones will be doing this. Our special economic zones also will invite international finance and capital. If we take Dubai, for example, in its special economic zones, we have 14 of the 23 biggest banks in the world in one special economic zone in Dubai. So special economic zones will be a catalyst for development where we can multiply them from time to time. Normally, these kind of zones are attached to ports because they are export oriented, but definitely since Ethiopia doesn't have a port, at least for now, the idea would be to create special economic zones everywhere. If you take Benshangul, we can talk about agro-processing special economic zones, mineral economic zones. We have gold there. The same thing with Gambella. Our livestock is exported now illegally through contraband, much of it through Somaliland. In fact, much of the Somaliland economy depends on this contraband trade we have between Ethiopia and the rest of the world. So now special economic zones in the Somali region would focus on exporting better breeds of cattle that are sanctioned by international health authorities so that their destination countries could accept them. So for us, this would mean different kind of meanings when we talk about special economic zones. But definitely, this is a great move and is going to project this country into the 21st century very clearly.
What would be the role of these special economic zones, especially in shifting the agricultural-led economy to industry then?
Well, you know, much of our work is going to be in agro-industry processing. And of course, it's not only for export purpose, but also for our internal purpose. Ethiopia used to export sugar before, under Emperor Haile Selassie. Now we are importing sugar. So there will be an opportunity when our 11 sugar industrial hinterlands are made functional, then we can export sugar in different volumes, in different packaging. The second thing is Ethiopia can produce a lot of fruits and food stuff that can be processed in these special economic zones for local consumption and for export. And another big potential we have in Ethiopia is our minerals. We see our minerals are being exported through illegal means now. We have emeralds, we have different kinds of stones that are being exported from this country. Now we can have special economic zones that are going to do the processing of our mineral products. And therefore I foresee different kinds of activities coming up, and definitely these special economic zones will be set up by the government with a policy and strategy, but whatever the private sector wants to do in these special economic zones is their creativity, and therefore we need to work on that. Probably, very soon we might come into the industrial processing that is based on artificial intelligence. So definitely this would help us a lot as a country.
What is your take on the new policy measures to ease foreign direct investment, which allowed the foreign investors in the country to own properties and which allowed them to take part in export and import process?
You know, it's been almost a quarter of a century while we're talking about this. I've given several interviews on this more than 25 years ago. There is no reason that foreigners cannot participate in Ethiopian trade. What we have to see the big picture. The big picture is how does the country and the people of the country benefit from trade. It's not how a small amount of traders will benefit from this and the rest of the country wouldn't benefit from this. Take our coffee export, for example. Let's say we have about 100 people exporting coffee. But definitely with the kind of quality of coffee we have, the Arabica quality, countries like Vietnam, who just came out of the war with the United States and still have bombs exploding everywhere in Vietnam, even today, has become the second largest coffee exporter in the world. It started far, far behind us. So we cannot depend on just local business to do this. International companies that will be coming to do this kind of activity have tremendous amount of experience. They have big markets outside, secure markets. They know how to package the quality products that the foreign markets want, and also they have the human resource and the management style to be able to do this. And of course, when they come here, they're not going to come here and start bagging coffee and exporting it. They're going to add a lot of value added stuff into it. The second thing is they're going to invest on this processing, or other companies will be coming to invest on this processing. I'll give you an example. If you take McDonald's, for example, the Big Mac, which is a sandwich made by McDonald's, is made the same way globally. It has the same content in terms of wheat flour, bread, in terms of meat, in terms of all the condiments that go into it. So if McDonald's comes here, they want businesses that are going to supply them with that kind of bread, with that kind of meat. So it's going to expand the opportunity for production too. So definitely our business also, our young business people coming out of the universities and vocational schools will learn a lot from them. They're going to bring the world experience into our country. And the myth that the local business will be hurt by this is just totally unfounded. There is no research that indicates that foreign business coming to do business in Ethiopia are going to hurt Ethiopian business. In fact, Ethiopian business will benefit a lot. They will learn from them. They will expand their opportunities. They will work with this foreign business in partnership. And therefore, you will have a lot of Ethiopians involved in this business instead of having 100 or 200 people who are in the export business and who control literally the foreign exchange of the country when it comes here. It has become subject of the National Bank of Ethiopia, where National Bank has to determine how much foreign currency would have to leave for these importers and exporters. But definitely when you have foreign businesses, of course, one caveat that you have here is Ethiopia has to very soon come up with the financial policy very clearly. The capital markets have to start working where Ethiopians can buy shares in these companies that are coming. The international capital introduction to Ethiopia at the private sector has to be completed. These are things that have to be done as fast as possible. Definitely, under globalization, trillions of dollars are transported over the internet now. And therefore, we cannot be outside the framework of the international trade system. In fact, Ethiopia has applied to join the World the World Trade Organization. Some of the requirements that we have are allowing foreign business to come here. In our initial application, the United States and Canada said that unless we liberalize our finance and our telecom, there will be no way they're going to allow Ethiopia to join the WTO. But now we have done that. So by opening also business for foreigners, what we'll do is they will come with huge investments. And the psychological impact of this is that a lot of other investors in terms of foreign direct investment will come into this country. So I see it as a positive way, and Ethiopian business should not be afraid that this is going to affect them in any way.
Mm-hmm. On this point, the government has been building several industrial zones in the country to attract foreign direct investment, and beside that there is also green energy in the country. And how do you see this, especially in easing the investment process and easily attracting foreign direct investment to the country?
Foreign direct investment is based on what you call branding, nation branding. We have to brand Ethiopia as a different country. We have to brand it. For example, Ethiopia was branded as a famine country. Oxford University used to define famine as Ethiopia. A lot of work has gone into to change that. And therefore, it's a question of branding. Branding is about peace and security. Branding is about ease of doing business. When Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed came into power, the first thing he said was that we have to improve our ease of doing business status within the World Bank report. The ease of doing business is something that we have to work on to attract investors. Number three, when we have foreign banks coming into Ethiopia, when investors, when they go anywhere, they don't come with their dollars stuck in their breast pocket. They ask what kind of banks are there to give us loans. Great investors, institutional investors, work with banks. They don't bring their own assets. Of course, they will have limited access to access the market, but definitely these international banks, once they are here, the investors could talk to their head offices anywhere in Europe, the United States, China, Japan, and then get their loans from the local branch here. So that is again a great move by the government. Capital markets are again one of the medium of investment. Once we have the capital markets ongoing, for example, Ethio Telecom wants to sell shares. So anybody sitting in Tokyo or New York or London can buy the shares through the internet. They don't have to come here, process an entry visa, process a permit, an investment permit. They don't have to do that. We have to project our country into the 21st century, where people who can invest in this country without even coming here in the first place. So for me, this is the importance of the capital markets foundation.
Finally, what is your take on the Ethio Telecom's move to sell at least 10% share to the Ethiopian nationals?
Well, this is the correct move. Frankly, eventually the markets will dictate what's going on. It's not just a question of putting 10% of their IPOs into the stock exchange. Definitely, if they find some good reason, they can put more of their shares as IPOs, because this is a fundamental way of raising funds for the telecom industry. You will have investors who are putting fresh money. It's useful for development, because now Ethio Telecom could transform itself into a kind of pedestal where much of the digital technologies are going to be managed in Ethiopia. Artificial intelligence is coming in a big way now. It's going to help us do better work. It's going to minimize the burden on human beings, and therefore the kind of internet connectivity that we need in this country will have to be real-time connection. It's not the kind of connection we have today, where it's become very difficult even to access emails at some point. So definitely Ethio Telecom will have more resources to develop this way. Ethio Telecom is trying to expand to other countries in Africa. So this kind of capital infusion will help it a lot. So definitely I'm sure 10% is the beginning, but definitely Ethio Telecom will be shedding much of its assets into the capital markets eventually.
I see. Dr. Constatinos Behretesfa, senior economist, renowned author and analyst, thank you for your vivid explanations, and thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Dear viewers, this is all we have for today. I hope you have got great points from our discussion. Thank you for being with us.